Hello, I'm Antoinette June with the Programming Department here at Free Speech TV, and I'm asking you to show your support for fearless, independent media by becoming a member of Free Speech TV online right now at freespeech.org. Help us continue to provide you with programming like Democracy Now! And the Thom Hartmann program.
As Republicans and Democrats continue disputing who should bear the brunt of the tax burden, our next guests argue America's middle class has been decimated over the years due to policies governing not only taxes but also bank regulations, trade deficits, and pension funds. Their new book chronicles how the American middle class has been systematically impoverished and its prospects thwarted in favor of a new ruling elite. We're joined now for the hour by Don Barlett and James Steele, the award-winning investigative reporters. They worked together for over 40 years, first at the Philadelphia Inquirer, then at Time magazine, most recently at Vanity Fair. They've also written 7 books. Their first book, America, What Went Wrong, was a New York Times bestseller. They share 2 Pulitzer Prizes, 2 National Magazine Awards. Their new book is called The Betrayal of the American Dream. Jim Steele, Don Bartlett, we welcome you both to Democracy Now! Start off by laying out your thesis, Don. Start off by talking about the betrayal of the American dream.
It really goes back to when we did America, What Went Wrong, which was in '91. And at that time, people were upset around the country. They knew something was happening, but they didn't know what. And what made that book so successful was that we pulled everything together in terms of pensions and pay and union membership and just everything economics. And you could see that there was a systematic attack going on in the middle class. At that time, it was still kind of, it could have gone either way if there had been a political response, which there should have been, but there wasn't. And as a result, when we received just literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of letters and emails over the last several years say, would you go back and look at this in terms of what you wrote the first time? And if we made one mistake the first time, it was we grossly underestimated how fast this country was going to go down the tubes. And we really did. Back then, there were still defined benefit pensions, and people still had a hope of getting them. They're gone. There was one wage structure. Now there are two-tiered wage systems all over the country. The one wage is gone. Income has been flat for the most part since then. You go down the list, and everything has gotten incredibly worse than it was then. And one of the arguments that was raised by critics back then was because that series ran right at the tail end of one of the recessions. And people said, well, what's happening now is really related to the recession, and once we're out of the recession, everything will be fine. And we made the point this was not true, that what was happening was totally unrelated to the recession. It was a result of structural defects in the American economy, and it was going to continue unless they were dealt with. Well, they weren't dealt with, and now everything is, you couldn't even go back now to the 2000 level and give people what they had then. It would be impossible, given the attitudes in Congress, the hardening lines in Washington.
I wanted to talk about specifics and also go general. Jim Steele, the story of corporations tell a very major story about the United States. Corporations like Apple and Boeing. Apple doesn't manufacture one product in the United States?
That's correct. That's correct. I think some of the parts are major, but basically the essential products aren't. And we made the point in the book, we actually wrote about this before a lot of the news surfaced this year, that what was significant about what Apple has done is not just their working conditions in China, which were horrendous by the subcontractors over there, but what they did, they completely closed down manufacturing in this country after really less than a generation. The historic pattern in this country was a product would be invented here, a company would go into business, they would start making it. Up and down the line, you had a broad-based workforce for that product, from folks on the factory floor to the designers to the salesmen, so on, to the stockholders who might be part of that company. But ultimately, you had this broad-based situation. Apple originally had some manufacturing in this country, but very quickly, in less than a generation, just closed that down and shipped most things to China and other countries. And it's just part of that pattern of where jobs that once middle-class people had in this country are now gone. You see a similar kind of thing now going on with Boeing. Boeing has outsourced all kinds of parts of the new Dreamliner, its great new aircraft, which of course has recently run into some problems with parts of their engines falling off, apparently. But Boeing is part of getting into the Chinese market, which everybody agrees will be a huge market, has manufactured all sorts of things over there. Basically what Boeing is doing, which a lot of companies are doing, they are basically showing the Chinese how to make airplanes. And what have the Chinese done? They're creating their own civilian aircraft industry, where we were told, I think in this country, the idea was have some presence there so we can sell them airplanes. But where is that going to lead down the line if we are turning over to them some of the technology that will let them build airplanes that are our principal export in this country?
And how much of that information, that knowledge, is taxpayer financed?
Boeing has, of course, been a major defense contractor over time, and many of those contracts have led to all sorts of technology that have worked their way into both civilian and military planes. Taxpayers have supported that. So now you have a situation where some of the technology that taxpayers have paid for through Boeing, and of course other contractors as well, not just them, is now going to be handed over to the Chinese to build airplanes to compete against us. And civil aircraft is the only significant export this country has.